It was inevitable, really, the moment Tony Stark snapped his fingers in Avengers. Endgame, the MCU changed forever because when Iron Man died and Steve Rogers passed on the shield, Marvel wasn't just closing out a saga, they were losing the two pillars that had held everything together for over a decade. And while the farewell was emotional, earned, even poetic, what came after has been anything but smooth. Because since Endgame, Marvel's been spinning, searching, scrambling to fill a void that just can't seem to be filled, no matter how many new characters they introduce, no matter how big the budgets get, no matter how many post-credit scenes promise the next big thing. And now, 5 years later, fans are asking the same question Marvel doesn't seem to want to answer. Why hasn't the magic returned? The truth is, replacing Tony Stark and Steve Rogers isn't just about writing new characters or finding the next charismatic lead. It's about legacy, about audience trust, about emotional investment that was built over years, movie by movie, moment by moment. Tony Stark wasn't just Iron Man. He was the beating heart of the MCU, flawed, brilliant, hilarious, and painfully human. And Robert Downey Jr.'s performance turned a B-tier comic book hero into a global icon. Steve Rogers, played with grounded strength by Chris Evans, was the soul, the compass, the quiet power that balanced Stark's chaos. Together, they were more than superheroes. They were the foundation, and now, without them, everything feels lighter, less rooted, less earned. Marvel has tried to move on, of course. They've introduced new faces like Sam Wilson as the new Captain America. They've brought in Shang-Chi, the Eternals, Moon Knight, She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel, and more recently, Kate Bishop and America Chavez. All talented, fresh, promising characters. But something's missing, and fans can feel it. Because legacy isn't just handed off with a shield or a suit. It's built over time, and the MCU's Phase 4 and 5 have felt rushed, overstuffed, and uneven, trying to juggle grief, multiverse madness, streaming series, and new storylines all at once, without ever stopping to let the audience breathe. The Disney Plus model, while ambitious, fractured the fan experience. Instead of 1 or 2 big films a year, fans were suddenly expected to keep up with 6 to 8 shows, each with its own tone, stakes, and lore, many of which directly tied into the films. Miss a show, and you're lost in the next movie. Watch the movie without context, and you're disconnected from the emotional arc. It's overwhelming, and the fatigue is real. Even critically successful projects like WandaVision and Loki haven't been able to replicate the cultural dominance of Infinity War or Endgame, and movies like Quantumania and The Marvels only deepen the problem. Not because the actors weren't strong, but because the stakes didn't feel earned, the writing felt stretched, and the audience was still reeling from losing characters they spent 10 years growing with. You can't manufacture that kind of loyalty in a couple of episodes or one film. There's also a tonal shift that's been hard to ignore. The humor has become louder, more frequent, and sometimes even disruptive to the story. Characters are quipping through trauma. Villains feel less threatening, and the weight that once anchored the MCU's best moments seems to be floating. Remember the intensity of Winter Soldier, the emotional devastation of Infinity War, the raw personal stakes of Civil War? That's been replaced with an over-reliance on CGI battles and jokes that undercut the emotion. And then there's Kang, once poised to be the next Thanos-level villain. Kang's entire arc is now in question following the off-screen controversies surrounding Jonathan Majors, and Marvel's silence around the future of the character has left fans unsure of where this entire multiverse saga is headed. Without a clear villain, without a central hero, and without a strong emotional thread pulling everything forward, the MCU feels like it's drifting. And fans are noticing. Some are nostalgic for the past. Some are tuning out altogether. And Marvel, once the most untouchable name in cinema, is facing its biggest challenge yet. Rebuilding trust, recapturing hearts, and redefining what this universe is supposed to be post-Tony, post-Steve. Because at the end of the day, no amount of cameos or callbacks can replace what made the MCU work in the first place. Character, connection, consequence. And until Marvel finds a way to ground its stories again, to slow down, to let us feel something real, the shadow of Iron Man and Captain America will keep looming over everything that comes next. They weren't just characters, they were the soul. And right now, that soul feels missing. When Avengers Endgame rolled credits, Marvel was riding a wave of global dominance. 22 interconnected films, an unprecedented feat in cinematic storytelling. And fans left theaters crying, cheering, emotionally drained, but fulfilled. And yet, beneath all that celebration, one question was already beginning to simmer. What now? Because with Iron Man gone, Steve Rogers retired, and Black Widow lost in Endgame, the original Avengers were either dead, sidelined, or replaced, and that meant Marvel had to usher in a new era fast, without missing a beat. So they tried. The first push came with Sam Wilson stepping into Captain America's shoes. A powerful moment on paper, a symbolic passing of the mantle. But the execution? Rushed, fragmented, handled mostly through The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a Disney Plus series that struggled to balance action with the weighty themes of identity, race, and legacy. And the result was a new Cap who never got the full-blown, big-screen coronation he deserved. And that matters, because Steve Rogers didn't become iconic overnight. It took years of films, character development, and emotional stakes, and Sam, though immensely likable and played with grounded charisma by Anthony Mackie, hasn't had that kind of runway yet. Then there's Peter Parker. Tom Holland's Spider-Man was positioned as the heart of the MCU post-Endgame, and for a moment, it looked like he could carry the torch. No Way Home was a massive success, emotionally resonant, filled with nostalgia, and it gave fans a glimpse of the old Marvel magic. But then silence. With no follow-up immediately announced, no Avengers films to anchor him into a team dynamic. Peter was quietly removed from the spotlight, his future uncertain, tangled in Sony Marvel contract negotiations and creative delays, and the momentum faded. Next came Shang-Chi, whose solo film had all the right ingredients: strong lead, incredible action, rich cultural backdrop. But once again, Marvel failed to integrate him meaningfully into the larger narrative. No Avengers-level team-ups, no crossovers, no indication of how he fits into the grand multiverse saga. And then there's the Kong problem. Jonathan Majors gave an electrifying performance as he who remains in Loki, setting the stage for Kong the Conqueror to become the next big bad, the new Thanos, the looming threat. But off-screen legal troubles threw everything into chaos. Marvel remained quiet, hesitant, while fans were left confused about Kang's role in Quantumania, a film that underperformed both critically and commercially, and rather than solidifying Kong as a terrifying villain, the movie left him feeling replaceable, uncertain, diluted by the existence of infinite variants. Villains matter. They define the stakes, they raise the bar, and right now, the MCU doesn't have one that unifies the story. Instead, the multiverse, once a thrilling concept full of promise, has become a crutch, a confusing, sprawling excuse to reset, reboot, and recast at will. And it's made death feel temporary, consequences feel hollow, and the stakes feel artificial. You can't build emotional weight when everything can be undone with a portal or a timeline tweak. And let's talk about the new characters: America Chavez, Kate Bishop, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, all played by talented actors, all introduced with energy and care, but none of them have been given the space to grow, to lead, to matter on a larger scale. Because Marvel hasn't committed. They haven't slowed down. They've flooded the content pipeline, sure, but more isn't better if audiences don't feel the heartbeat behind it. That's what made the Infinity Saga so powerful. Each film felt like it built towards something real, something massive, and most importantly, something emotionally grounded. Now, it feels scattered, disconnected, and worst of all, forgettable. Even the Guardians of the Galaxy, once Marvel's most lovable misfits, got a send-off in Volume 3 that, while heartfelt, felt like a goodbye to another chapter of Marvel that worked. And maybe that's the problem. The chapters that worked are closing, and the new ones haven't started strong enough to take over. So where does that leave us? With audiences still asking, who's the new face of the MCU? Who do we root for? Who do we fear? And does Marvel even know the answer? Because right now, it feels like the engine is still running, but the driver's gone. And fans? They're not along for the ride the way they used to be. After Endgame closed the book on the Infinity Saga, Marvel didn't just face the challenge of writing a new chapter. It faced the weight of expectation, the shadow of its own success looming over every new project. And as they rushed to populate Phase 4 and 5, something crucial was lost in the process: cohesion, consistency, and, above all, the sense of an emotional core. Nowhere is that more obvious than in the Disney Plus era of Marvel. At first, it felt exciting. A deeper dive into characters like Wanda Maximoff, a long-overdue spotlight for Sam Wilson, a trippy expansion of Loki's arc, all sounded promising on paper, and at times even delivered stunning moments on screen. But what quickly became apparent is that these shows were spinning their wheels. Yes, WandaVision brought buzz and mystery, but by the finale, it reset Wanda's arc into a darker, disconnected figure who suddenly morphed into a full-blown villain in Multiverse of Madness with little emotional setup. Because replacing Iron Man and Captain America isn't about matching charisma or explosions. It's about building emotional investment from the ground up. It's about giving audiences characters they can grow with over time. It's about letting stakes breathe, letting victories feel earned, and consequences feel permanent. Marvel can still do it. The engine still works, the actors are still here, the stories are still out there waiting to be told. But it takes discipline now. Less content, more purpose. Fewer cameos, more character. And above all, it takes the courage to slow down in a world that demands constant motion. Because if Marvel doesn't rediscover its heart, its soul, then the multiverse won't save it. Nostalgia won't save it. Even Wolverine won't save it. Only story will. And right now, that's what they need to fight for again. Just like the heroes we fell in love with did when this all began. Because the real power of the MCU was never the superpowers. It was always the people behind the masks, the stories they carried, and the world we believed in. Maybe it's time to believe again.